Welcome into this special edition of On Texas Football. I'm Gerry Hamilton, joined by CJ Vogel. All right, we're talking a little NFL draft. Mel Kiper Jr. updated his big board ahead of the 2024 NFL draft. Obviously, Senior Bowl being played today. A number of Texas Longhorns in that. We're going to hit on Mel Kiper's updated big board, though. So I want to kind of take Texas fans through what we're going to talk about here. Wide receiver big board. I'm going to look down at my notes a little bit here. So Xavier Worthy checks in at number 7, A.D. Mitchell number 8, which the mock drafts are all over the place. We'll get into that with which of those guys goes first. D tackle, Jerzon Newton out of Clearwater, Florida, out of Illinois, number 1. It'll be interesting to see if he sticks there. Tavondre Sweat, 2, Byron Murphy, 3, then Chris Jenkins, some of those Southeast guys after that. McKinley Jackson from A&M, number 7. On that list. Off-ball linebacker, Edgerrin Cooper at A&M, number 1. Jeremiah Trotter Jr., number 2 from Clemson. Checking in at number 5, Jalen Ford out of Texas, which that's good for his draft stock. Tight end, very interesting. Texas fans will probably have some comments on that. Brock Bowers, number 1, obviously. JT Sanders, number 2. That's one of the positions, CJ, before we really break this down, that stayed the same as it was headed into this season, which is so rare. Then you have Theo Johnson from out of Canada in Penn State, number 3. Jared Wiley, former Texas tight end, TCU standout, number 7. Running back, Jonathan Brooks remains number 1 on Mel Kiper Jr.'s big board at running back, which tells you it's not a great running back draft when the number 1 running back has an ACL tear and surgery. And then number 9, kicker punter, Ryan Sanborn. So, CJ, I know you have some comments on wide receiver. Let's get started there. Just kind of your thoughts. And I want to say this at wide receiver before we get going. Obviously, number 1's Marvin Harrison Jr. 6 of the top 10 are from the Southeast region. Something to always remember around the NFL draft time, how dominant it is in the Southeast region.
It certainly is. And, we talked about it recruiting-wise. It's fun Texas is getting, a stronger foothold in there. But this receiving group is really interesting, and it's one of the deeper classes I've seen in quite a while. You talk about Marvin Harrison up at the top. Roma Dunze and Malik Neighbors are guys that you expect to hear their names called in the top 10. How often do you see 3 wide receivers taken in the top 10, let alone what could be 7 or 8 in the first round alone? When you're hearing the conversation about Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell potentially slipping to the second round after seeing the talent that they've been able to put on the field over the last couple of seasons, you're sitting there thinking, how's that happening? But one of those teams that's picking around, 25 to 35, maybe even 40 if they fall a little bit, those teams are getting a hell of a talent for great value. And so I think that's going to be interesting to see just how that plays out. But I'm really interested to see the pro days for A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy, because I think you look at that list that Mel Kiper put out and you're like, all right, like the top 5, I can probably have guaranteed that probably midway through the season. You're talking Marvin Harrison, Roma Dunze, Malik Neighbors. Yeah. Brian Thomas at LSU, the other, their wide receiver 2 led the country with 17 touchdown receptions this year. That's something that you knew was going to play into a factor with their draft role. But Ladd McConkey to me is one that's interesting.
Yes.
And he's one that certainly helped his draft stock a lot this weekend in Mobile for the Senior Bowl, something that Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell did not participate in. And so I kind of sit around and think, like Jatavian Sanders probably didn't need to participate all too much, but it probably could have helped him maybe slip into the back end of that first round, maybe jump into that 35 range a little bit, had he put on a good showing in the team aspect of things, showing that he can block these NFL caliber ready draft prospects. So I look at that as not a missed opportunity, but something that could look back after the draft and say, maybe 3 or 4 slots higher or whatever had they participated. But that to me is really interesting because McConkey was dominant in Mobile. He was tremendous, and he was getting, comps to Cooper Kupp, and you don't get that very often.
You know what's interesting about that, CJ? So I'm been pretty close to somebody at Georgia for a while, and I was having a conversation with him mid-season, and talking about the injuries, kind of, and said, people don't understand how much we miss Ladd McConkey and how good he really is. I was like, okay, I knew he was good, but to hear this person tell me that, I'm not surprised that he's gone out and had a great week at the Senior Bowl after that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, he balled in the national championship a year ago. Yep. I mean, it was kind of one of those, like, surely someone's going to be able to stick with this guy and guard him, but he's just so savvy in his routes that separation comes so naturally. NFL team is going to be very happy with him. And again, it's a deep draft. So the abundance of wealth will certainly factor into Worthy and Mitchell. I think they're going to end up at better quarterback situations than these guys going in the top 10.
And to your point, not so much Worthy. I think we know he's going to test extremely well,
right?
Whether that's a 40, whether that's his 10 split, whether that's a 5-10-5, whether that's an L cone, he's going to blow all that stuff out of the water. The people that are going to really, when they start diving into it, look, they're just looking for warts at this point on these guys, right? They're going to be saying, are the hands consistent enough?
Mm-hmm.
How is he going to hold up physically in the NFL? Those are going to be he's going to blow away the testing part of that. AD Mitchell's interesting. If he runs really well,
yes,
he has a chance to move up a couple of spots in that rankings. I would think. So to your point on the NFL Combine and the pro days are going to be huge. I think it's huge for AD Mitchell. I really do. And where he's going to get drafted and slotted when April comes around.
I'm with you on the testing for AD Mitchell. Creating separation was all just kind of his question mark. Obviously, the body control and the hands were the plus, but it's very encouraging right now under Sarkisian that Texas is about to send 2 guys to the NFL drafted in the 2nd round or better for the first time since Lima Swede in 2008.
That's big.
And so Devin Duvernay obviously was a 3rd-round guy a few years ago, but it's been that long since Texas had a top-end wide receiver taken and viewed by the NFL, taken in the draft this early. So credit to Sarkisian, Chris Jackson, Brennan Marion, everyone that was involved with these guys, because it's the new standard, essentially, of what we're going to see from the Texas receivers moving forward.
And here's the thing. We'll tie a little recruiting into that. It's much easier to go to the portal and get Isaiah Bond and Matthew Golden and go to the high school ranks and get Ryan Wingo out of Missouri.
Absolutely.
With the scheme and success carrying over from the being OC at Alabama, which is when the most eyes got on Sark. Let's be real. That's when the most eyes got back on Steve Sarkisian. But that's carried over to Texas, and now guys have transferred in and had production. Xavier Worthy, his first recruit at Texas, had a tremendous career, played through some injury, had a tremendous career. So these guys panning out, whether it's from the high school rank in Worthy or from the portal transferring over AD Mitchell, that is a huge bonus for Sarkisian, Chris Jackson, and this Texas staff moving forward. All right, CJ, I want to hit on D-line a little bit. I think it's interesting that Mel Kiper has, and we're not sitting here going to break down the Mel Kiper's top 10. Everybody has different mock drafts and guys slotted right now. That he has Tavondre Sweat over Byron Murphy. Jerzon Newton's number 1. He came out of Clearwater as a 3-star pro. Look, this is the D-line of 3 stars. I mean, essentially, now some of the other lower guys are ranked high. Leonard Taylor at Miami was a 5-star guy coming out. But these guys at the top were either high 3-star, low 4-star guys. Byron Murphy was one of the lowest 4-star guys. Sweat was a high 3-star guy. Jerzon Newton was that high 3-star guy. I'm interested to see. They're looking for warts. Jerzon Newton, I think, is the most talented interior D lineman in the draft. No question about it. Is he going to actually be the first one drafted? I think that's why we're seeing Byron Murphy climb, CJ's, because he checks every box when these guys are doing their research.
He certainly does. And we've seen the production. He was first in the SEC plus Texas in terms of pass pressures in this past season, and we've obviously seen what he can do in the run game as well. That's kind of the big difference maker between Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat. Yeah. Can you keep Sweat on the field for 3 downs? That's the question mark. We saw some ups, we saw some downs in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. In the pass rushing side of things, he had good moments. He obviously put a guy on his backside in which it looked like he broke both of his legs. But then you also see him slip a little bit. He didn't weigh in. There's questions about his weight and how in shape he is.
Right now, CJ, I think that drops him a little bit.
I'm with you.
Got some work to do ahead of these pro days combine, and this is going to be a chance for him to move up in some people's eyes, where I think he might have moved down a little bit from what you just said.
Yeah, it's a bit, one of those double-edged sword things for guys that are hopeful to be in the draft because you want to go out there, you want to perform well. Well, if you don't check all the boxes or you leave stuff to be wondered about, then the question marks really start to come in. And we're, like you mentioned earlier, NFL scouts are really looking for a reason to not draft you. Right?
That's right.
They've seen the production, they've seen the film, they know everything about you. Why should I not take a 1st or 2nd round pick on you right now? And I don't want to call it a red flag, but it is questioning right now. But to your point about the 3 stars kind of owning the draft in the trenches, that's not usual. That's not what you see very often, especially, in years past where it felt like Clemson had a 5-star defensive lineman every year going in the top 15. Alabama's obviously been in that conversation, Georgia too. But right now we're talking about a lot of guys who benefited from maybe a slower start to their college career and then just developing over time and really starting to dominate, as we've seen from Byron Murphy and T'Vondre Sweat, and obviously the kid out of Miami as well.
And let's point out why this week is huge for T'Vondre Sweat. Obviously, talking to somebody who's really tied into the draft on the DLine side for me, a longtime friend who's really great at what he does. He said the interior offensive line in the Big 12 did not have many NFL draft picks, and the NFL wasn't high on many of those guys. Oklahoma had some tackles, but so there were the questions when they're, like you said, they're looking for reasons not to draft a guy. They're looking for warts right now. Some people in the NFL circles wondered about Murphy and Sweat because they didn't play against the high-end talent on the interior offensive line. So even Sweat playing some bully ball this week has helped him. I think he's going to have to continue to work on that frame a little bit, shed some pounds here headed into the NFL draft, because he's seen it. And this person I talked to, he's predicting right now Byron Murphy in the 12 to 25 range of the first round. If he blows testing out of the water, he could move into that top 10. He thinks those mock drafts with him in the top 5 right now are a little high, even top 10. So that testing is going to be big because Byron's not as twitched up as Aaron Donald, who is, but that's really as a 6'5", 6'1", 295-pound guy that people, when they start chipping away at you, okay, you don't have the longest arms and you're not as twitched up as some other guys. So if he tests really well and kind of exceeds expectations, then he could move in that top 10. This person I talked to has Sweat projected as a 3rd rounder, could slide into the 2nd. Based on him being a 1st and 2nd down player only, to your point.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't see too many 360-pound guys that, you can't rely on in pass without being able to rush the passer. Right. Vita Vea is able to do it, but he's a freak. And Ndamukong Suh, maybe not as big, but a guy that, again, had a lot of success getting after the passer. So that's going to have to slim down a little bit for Sweat in my eyes. I'm really interested to see how Murphy times, because like you said, the film is there to be a first-round guy. I think that you can't dispute that at this point. Right. We expect him to go in the first round, but is his acceleration and burst off the ball up there with the elite of the elite that kind of make up for what is maybe not the longest wingspan for Murphy? I think that's something that will certainly help his case in terms of what we could see from a pro day from him.
Yeah, and then again, I want to just go over this one more time for fans. So Mel Kiper updated his big board. Number 7 at wide receiver, Xavier Worthy. Number 8, A.D. Mitchell. Defensive tackle, T'Vondre Sweat. Number 2, Byron Murphy. Number 3, running back, Jonathan Brooks. Number 1, which I think is interesting. If he remains the number 1 running back, where will that actually get him drafted in this draft? Tight end, I think Brock Bowers 1, Jatavion Sanders 2. Checking at number 7, Jared Wiley, former Temple High, Texas tight end, transfer to TCU. I want you to get into that a little bit. And then Jalen Ford, number 5, off the ball linebacker. Ryan Sanborn, number 9, punter, which probably leaves him as a free agent, right? But kind of get into that tight end position. I mean, Jared Wiley had a big week. Obviously, JT Sanders is holding his position at 2. I think the only things that could knock JT down a little bit is if he ends up with a neutral +1 wingspan, and then people just question the blocking. But as far as everything else, he's worthy of being that number 2 guy behind Brock Bowers.
Yeah, I would say those are the question marks right now. Does he have the catch radius of some of those elite tight ends that we're seeing in the league right now? And can he help you as a plus in the trenches? Yeah. And that was kind of always the question mark. That's why we didn't see him as a true freshman at Texas, because Jeff Banks was like, well, you know what? We're going to have to take some time in the developmental stage. And he's gotten to a point now where you can rely on him enough to get holes created in the running game, but probably not where you'd like to see him as a full-time NFL tight end, and where you can really rely on him to be that inline guy to wham block, to come across, to pull, whatever, and also be that threat down the field. We know how good he is when the ball's in the air going down the field, especially over the middle. The question marks for JT are really can he do everything else a tight end is asked to do? And that's a loaded position. They get a lot put on their plate, and the good ones are really good at it. The Kittles obviously dominate in terms of the physicality side of things, and then the Travis Kelce's are able to create space, understand zone schemes, and really be able to be a threat after the ball. The combination of those two guys, very rare, very hard to find, but you got to excel in one side to really have that NFL valuability right now. You mentioned Jared Wiley, and that's interesting to me. Texas fans didn't really see a whole lot of maybe consistent production, and maybe there's some left on the bone that you'd like to have seen brought out of Jared Wiley during his time at Texas. But credit to him, those 2 years at TCU, I thought they used him a little bit better than what Texas had used him in. Obviously, a little bit of a different offense in the time that we saw a lot of him here in Austin for. But TCU really used him as that inline guy in the quick short game. I thought was interesting. Texas wasn't going to use him as a guy as an over route or crosser guy like we saw Jatavian. He just doesn't have that end speed as we've seen. But he really had a good, strong week in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. And I think with him, his physicality has grown from where it was. It's still not a true strength for him, but at 6'7", all you really need is the willingness and the effort there. And that's something that took a lot of time in my eyes to fully develop for Jared Wiley.
And it was interesting when he was early on at Texas, had somebody on that staff tell me that pound for pound absolutely was one of the best athletes in the program.
Right.
So I don't think we're surprised. Look, it's not add water instant players. I say all the time. Some of these guys, they have to develop on their own time frame. And sometimes that takes a transfer. Sometimes that takes year 4, year 5. I mean, just think about where Tavondre Sweat was coming out of high school, where he is now. So again, we'll be talking a lot more NFL draft as it gets closer and closer. But CJ and I wanted to do a little special update today with Mel Kiper Jr. updating his big board. 7 Longhorns we mentioned today. Steve Sarkisian said a couple of days ago, Texas could have as many as 10 or 11 guys drafted in this draft. We'll see where that number it continues to look like. I think we're both betting on more like 8 or 9 right now. But if Sark hits on his 10 or 11, man, that is one hell of a song to sing in recruiting.
Absolutely is. In year 3 to be sending that many guys to the league just shows the development is here for my staff. That's Sarkisian's message. Also, last time Texas had 8 guys drafted in the NFL draft, 1991. So big box to check. Wide receivers, obviously 2008 with Lima Sweet, a lot of excitement early in the rounds. This is fun. This is fun now. We get to move the on-field success to the NFL and eventually
we actually get to talk about the NFL draft. I mean, think about next year. I mean, we're going to have tons of shows next year on this stuff, but Kelvin Banks, Quinn Ewers. I mean, think about Isaiah Bond coming in, Nyblack coming in. You just kind of go down the list. There's some people in the building in Austin. I think Cam Williams is going to end up being a first-round pick one day. I mean, we got
next year. We'll also get to talk about a quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. And the running back room is full. So there's going to be a lot to talk about in the future here with Texas in the NFL draft. For CJ Vogel, I'm Gerry Hamilton. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll have more NFL draft talk in the coming days and weeks as we head into that April draft.